The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Good afternoon, Los Angeles. Welcome to another Ask the Experts, where we bring you the top experts in the field of home improvement, financial, legal, and also medical. Folks, I'm going to tell you, about 8 months ago, I was getting in emails from you, and we do appreciate the emails. And because we have so many homeowners, we got emails saying, how come you don't do a show on mold? And, you know, it's not easy just finding an expert. But I got to tell you, we found one of the greatest experts when it comes to mold. And what I love about this company, the company's called Mold Zero. Not only do they have a great name, but that's the area they concentrate on. And I'm making a big deal out of that because a lot of these companies out there, they do all kinds of cleanup. But when you can find a company that just narrows in right there in one area, I have found over the last 12 years of doing this show, those are always the best ones that don't try to be everything to everybody. So let me welcome you. We've got, we delivered for you. You asked for it. We have the Mold Zero, the owner, one of the partners, Raymond Alemania. Good. Hey, Raymond, can I just call you Ray?
Yeah, Ray's totally fine, Steve.
Okay, buddy. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How's everything on your side?
It's good. You know, you are always so upbeat. I love doing the show with you, and I know the audience appreciates it. And I have got so many questions for you, but gosh, we got 3 people who wrote us an email. They took the time out to write us an email after your last show telling us what a great show it was. So I want people to know who you are, since we're getting so many new listeners every week. Tell people about yourself and about Mold Zero.
Well, Mold Zero is a company based out of Southern California, and we reach out to most of the larger counties in Southern California, into Orange County as well. We don't go as far as Santa Barbara or San Diego, but the beach areas, inland, the valley. But what we do specifically as a company, we deal with mold. And as things have been progressing down the way, a lot of these doctors are realizing how adversely bodies are affected by mold. And so many things are connected to it. And I'm not a medical specialist by any stretch, but just from experience, and we deal with a lot of mold doctors. And by the way, a lot of these mold doctors are DOs, doctors of osteopathy, which means they have 2 more years of education than an MD. And they know about bodies, but a lot of them, because of what they've been finding out statistically, a lot of these DOs have been specializing in mold. And a lot of these doctors who are unsolicited by us, they recommend their patients to use our services before they start their protocol on their bodies, so to make sure that their environments are clean. So what we do is we make sure that environments in regards to mold are at safe levels. Because even though our company is called Mold Zero, there is no you can't get mold to a zero level, right? Just letting you know, because mold is part of everybody's life. If you live on planet Earth, mold is coming in and out of everyone's life 24/7. So, the industry agreement standard is the mold levels in one structure must be lower than the total mold levels directly outside that same structure. And that's what we do on a consistent, regular basis. And we do viable and non-viable post-testing.
Well, I tell you, I've got so many questions for you today, and let's just get right into it. Why does mold affect people differently? Is it because there's so many types of mold?
That's a partial answer. There's several reasons for it, but there's two basic reasons I always like to touch on. First off, about 12, 15 years ago now, it was discovered by the medical community that about 25% of people's DNA get very, very adversely affected by it. Now, all of us are on that spectrum to some greater or lesser degree, but 25% of us have the DNA that's bad news, very bad news. And I don't know where everybody's at. So there's that aspect to it. Another aspect to it is it depends on each individual's history of their immune system, how well it's defended itself or how poorly it's defended itself in the past against mold. To explain this a little bit, clearer, I've been in like 6-member families. I've used this example before. 6-member families where 2 of the people in the family are like hospital sick. They might be one of the 25%. The next 2 have brain fog and respiratory problems. And the last 2, maybe itchiness and cough. Now, you would think that all of them having similar DNA, they would be uniformly the same. It's not true. So it depends on, yes, the type of mold. Certain molds are worse than the others. But more importantly, it depends on how much that body is being overwhelmed by whatever mold it is. And by the way, there's over 100,000 different species of mold. There's actually over.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, there's over 10,000, but that's not counting when they do marriages, because mold spores can commingle and co-marriage. There's penicillium, there's aspergillus, there's chaetomium, there's stachybotrys, on and on. I don't keep you these.
Do you need to know what kind of mold it is before you treat the house?
No. The good thing about this, if it's found out, whether through pre-testing from us or pre-testing from another company, or they've discovered it, or there's visible mold, it doesn't matter, because one doesn't want to risk if it's going to adversely affect members of the family, right? Because again, I've been in situations where one member of the family is going, I don't know what the problem is, and another one can't stand being in the room, right? So you want to take care of the mold no matter if it's a very severe type of mold. And by the way, what everybody knows as black mold, that's called Stachybotrys, right? There's another mold that's...
I like black mold better.
I'm sorry?
I think black mold's easier to say.
Yeah, right. There's all these technical... Well, there's another mold called chaetomium, which is just as bad as far as black mold goes. So these are called marker molds, and every state has their different marker molds. But chaetomium and Stachybotrys, it's not a good thing. That usually affects everybody. Again, there's all types of mold, but it depends on that body's immune system, how successful or unsuccessful it's been in the past, and then also their DNA, right? So it almost, to answer your question succinctly, it really almost doesn't matter what type of mold it is, because why would you risk and put yourself or your family in harm's way and go, let me test this to make sure that, you don't know what their history is. You don't know how they defend themselves.
So I know people who are sitting here either watching or listening to the show right now, on their mind, they're going, how do I know if I have mold or not?
Yeah, you can do, the easiest thing to do is to pre-test, because, all my inspectors, they're trained not to call out mold unless they emphatically know it's mold, visible mold. And by that time, everybody knows it's mold, So what one can do is what they call pre-testing. And these pre-tests, we take samples of the air, or you can either take air samples of the air and or take surface samples, which surface samples break out into 3 categories. They could be a swab, just like it sounds, or a tape sample, a biotape, which goes on a little plastic or glass thing that looks under a microscope, or a block sample. So whether it's air sample or surface samples, you can take them before. And again, you're going to see how they are compared to relatively outside. These samples will go to an outside third-party lab, an unbiased third-party lab, and they're going to examine what's been delivered to them, these samples, and then they're going to tell you in 5 to 7 business days, usually, sometimes less.
What do I look for?
One is looking for, like, let's say they have different things. They have percentages, raw count, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you look at a report in alphabetical order, there'll be, Basidospores, Chaetomium, Cladosporium, blah, 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 all the way down, A to Z on mold. And then across, you're going to see raw count and percentages, blah, blah, blah. The total count should be lower than the outside baseline, because whoever's testing is going to do an outside baseline. If it's the same or higher, then that's bad news. You got to do something about it. And let me try to bring this to a better understanding, because mold is not rocket science, how to deal with it. So if one understands this, they don't have to be afraid, because a lot of people I run into all the time, they go, how do I protect myself? Mold is all over the place. And if you have an understanding about it, you don't have to be in fear of it. So when I say mold has to be lower than the outside baseline, the reason behind that is these mold spores, whether they're inside or outside a structure, are doing nature's work. They're eating, procreating, and spreading. Eating, procreating, and spreading. Whether they do that inside or outside, they're going to do it anyway. Now, whenever they eat and procreate and spread, they call it burping and farting, but they emit these gases called mycotoxins. These mycotoxins randomly float in the air. That specifically is what's wrong with mold spores, these mycotoxins. And it's from a live mold spore that's eating, procreating, and spreading, because it's burping and farting the mycotoxins. And they randomly float in the air. And when they get in your system, it's bad news. Now, the reason why that's important to know is if mold is doing that all the time, then it's doing that outside, right? But if it's lower, it's not going to affect you, because your body is a pretty strong vehicle, amazing piece of nature that will defend itself. But if it's higher than outside, and it's, we'll call it not incubated, but inside a structure, that overwhelms the body. So now you have all these random mycotoxins floating around, right? That's why people feel good. I can't tell you how many stories I'll hear of a client saying, I would work in my office and it was so bad, I ended up setting my office out in my patio. Oh. And it was right. They'd be up sleeping. I've had a handful of people, they were sleeping outside because they just instinctually felt better, right? Anyway, I hope that gives an understanding, because we don't have to be afraid of mold if we understand it. But that's the ABC of it. Mold can overwhelm.
We're getting a lot of people who are writing in right now, wanting to have, almost all of them have about the same question, Ray, is one, where do I look in my house for mold? Can I see mold? And how dangerous is it?
Yeah. So let's take this. Go ahead.
That's from
let's take those 3 questions separately. Yeah. So mold spores are only 20 to 30 microns. That's invisible.
Okay,
if there was
so
a dot you can't see it. You can't. I mean, when you do see mold, that's a lot of mold. Yeah, you can smell mold too. You can also smell it. People know it. People go into those old quote unquote haunted mansions, especially on Halloween. People go to those old big mansions. They say, "Ooh, what's that cool musty smell?" Number one, it's not cool.
Yes.
Mold. It's been there for a long time. So to answer that question is, mold spores are invisible. Now, when you do see it visibly, because you can't see mold, that's a lot of mold. Because if mold spores are 20 to 30 microns, to give you an idea, to demonstrate that, if there's a dot on the wall behind me, that dot would literally be millions and millions of mold spores. So you can imagine 20 to 30 microns is absolutely invisible. So now it gives you the idea how horrific it can be, because if it's invisible and has the capabilities of traveling really fast, that's why sometimes certain remediation procedures don't work, because they'll concentrate on an area. Let's say it's the kitchen or the bathroom. And this is going to answer the other part of the question. Mold needs moisture usually to get going. Oxygen, a food source, and everything's a food source. Wood, carpet, walls, ceilings, even pet hair and dead skin. So everything's a food source. Third thing, of course, is the moisture. So air, food source, moisture at the right humidity, the right temperature, mold's going to grow. So that's why you see it a lot of times in bathrooms, you see a lot of times in kitchens, right? But to answer that question, so now you're overwhelmed with this mold that's coming in and out. Well, certain protocols have been, well, we're going to concentrate and just do the bathroom. And then 2 months, 5 months, 10 months later, that same client calls back and says, my gosh, the mold came back. It didn't come back. It never fully left. So that's why we fog the whole area, right? So that's the thing to understand. It's not, when people understand that mold is just doing its thing, it's just getting itself up for the next sequence of nature. And it doesn't know if it's outside or inside. So it's going to eat, procreate, and spread, eat, procreate, and spread. If it gets challenged, it'll defend itself. And instead of just colonizing like it's doing on a normal, if it's happy and satisfied, it's not going to, be that visible. But if it feels challenged, it's going to what they call sporulate. That means it's going from millions to billions in a short amount of time. I think that makes sense. So
God, it's almost like mold's got a brain.
It seems that way. It is not a sentient, entity. It really is just part of nature, and it's throwing things. It's breaking down things so the next step of nature can build again. The problem is when it's doing it too much inside a house, it can overwhelm bodies.
So, Ray, do people, since they can't see it,
yeah,
I mean, do they wait till they get sick, or should you come out every 6 months to check? How do you determine if you have mold?
We do have clients that do that, and those are usually a lot of medical people or people who have chronic illnesses, and they just want to be sure. But what one can do is, whenever one has moisture, like a lot of times people said, I had a flood in my kitchen, I fixed my flood, but I don't feel safe. Well, they're right not to feel safe, right? Instinctually, they know that's not right. My floor was soaking, right? It's saturated. That's when mold can grow, right? Because all it has to be a certain temperature, a certain humidity, and those floorboards, that's the right humidity, right? So to protect oneself, you can test. You can test on an annual basis if you want, or whenever something happens. The toilet overflows. How long was the water sitting there? If you address it right away, you have a better chance, a higher percentage. It's not like I don't want your business. I tell people that all the time. Well, you mean you don't want my business? Believe me, there's enough business. You want to address your moisture problems ASAP.
Gotcha.
Right. If it stays there, your percentages go up phenomenally about getting mold, right? So go ahead.
You use a dry fog process. Why do you like that?
Because instead of, how we've been doing it for the last 200 years, if there's mold in an environment, in a structure, we try to remove it, take it out. And that works sometimes, right? If it's mold's there, let's remove it. The problem is those two things I said earlier. Mold spores are very tiny, 20 to 30 microns, invisible, and mold has a capability of spreading as fast as you can smell bacon throughout the house. So a lot of times when people try to take out the mold, I won't say every time, but many times, sometime later, they'll say, hey, the mold came back. I had it in my bathroom, but now it's in my kitchen. Or I had it in my closet, and now it's in my ceiling. Or I had it in my garage, and now it's in my walkway. So instead of trying to remove the mold, we kill the mold in the environment. And how this works is, in fact, I think I mentioned this before. The guy who invented it, he's a buddy of mine now out of Utah. So I know a lot of his backstory. He was approached by several hospitals in Utah to come up with a system to clean rooms in hospitals, to clean surgery rooms, because they have all that problem, in between surgeries, they have all this stuff. So he came up with this stuff, this dual dry fogging thing, this dry fog process, and he found that it worked. And then what down the years past, we just started applying because it's a sporicide. So it kills spores. It takes out the outer membrane on a molecular level. It shatters the outer membrane of the molecule of mold spores. So now it can't eat and procreate because it's not a full mold, right? There could be remnants of it, but that isn't effective. If the mold's not alive and not a whole and not eating and procreating and spreading, it can't then emit or burp and fart those mycotoxins, which is specifically what's wrong with mold, right? But anyway, that's what he did, and that's why we like the dry fog system, because instead of trying to remove the mold, which, think about it, if mold is really small, it spreads really fast, the odds of me getting all the mold by
that makes sense.
Not really good. So we fog the whole area. The first phase kills existing mold, and I say existing because remember, mold is still going to travel in and out 24/7. The second phase puts an antimicrobial protectorant, so it makes it very difficult for mold to colonize and co-marriage and co-mingle and to exist because they can't land any place. And then the third step is we do a test. We do a post-test to ensure that the mold levels are down, and we're doing viable testing now. That means, there could be like if I don't clean up the mold physically and mold's still there, people say, oh, it's there, but I say it's dead. But to make sure, we do a what they call a viable test, and it shows that it's actually indeed it's inert. It's not dormant. Dormant's different because mold, like I was mentioning that example of old mansions that have that musty smell. A lot of times that mold has been there for 200 years, but it lays dormant for a while. Right, it lays dormant, and it gets reenacted. So this is different. When you kill our mold, when you kill the mold with our process, the first phase kills it, and the second step puts a protectorant. It is inert.
Does it go behind? Does it get this mold get behind the walls?
Absolutely. Because remember, mold is.
So how do you do that? How do you do the dry fog process when the mold gets behind the walls?
Well, any place the mold has gone, we can go, and we also have the capability of opening up walls and getting behind drywall, right? But the ABC of it is this: mold spores are 20 to 30 microns. That's how it goes in the little nooks and crannies into the wall plugs. Our process, when it's dense and dry, becomes I don't know exactly, but it's less than 20. I think it's 7.5 microns. But it's much smaller than the 20 to 30 microns. The point is, so wherever the mold has come, has gone and permeated, our fog is going to go as well. Not to mention, if we need to, we'll open up walls and ceilings and stuff, and we'll put them back. Different than a lot of companies.
Do people have to leave the house when you do this dry fog?
Absolutely. They have to leave. Now, other companies, a lot of times you have to be gone for 2 or 3 weeks. In a house under 2,000 square feet or even around that area, we can do it in a day. So they just need to be gone. If we get access in the morning, they can be in that house as long as there's not a lot of opening up walls. I'm just talking about fogging.
Right.
We'll be back in that house that evening, which is pretty amazing.
Well, the name of the company is Mold Zero. And I got to tell you, I have so many more questions, which you're going to be with us again next month. Yeah. And for all the people who are texting us, let me give everybody Mold Zero's phone number. It's 626-671-8885. And go to their website. It's www.moldzerollc.com. That's moldzerollc.com. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody. I'm sorry I didn't get all my questions in. Raymond, what a great job that you do explaining to people about mold, because you can get really sick from mold.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? When you have a house and you're on the West Coast, which you are, your chances of getting mold are very high, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yep.
Raymond, thank you for coming on today. The show goes by so fast, but we'll see you again next month on the Ask the Expert show.
I appreciate you giving us the opportunity and having this forum for it. So I appreciate what you do, Steve.
Thanks, Raymond.
Thank you, Steve.
And that was the Mold Zero people. God, what? And I had so many more questions, but we only have so much time. We will be back with you next week with more Ask the Experts. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.